The Michigan spring game is less than 24 hours away, and we are going to not only preview the game in terms of, but we already kind of covered some of the things I want to see. We're going to do 10 players that I am looking forward to watching in particular. We'll get into all of that, including our full defensive depth chart breakdown as it stands right now, because it might be moot 24-ish hours from now. But we're going to get into all of it on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Friday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, and a rare pre-7 p.m. episode here that we're getting into as we prepare for the spring game, which takes place at noon on Fox tomorrow from the Big House. We've got Joel Klatt on the sidelines, Jake Butt up in the booth. Very excited about seeing those guys, and obviously very excited to see this Michigan team, because it's going to be fun just to kind of see the bumper crop. I think that's the bigger important part of a spring game like this, because it isn't, the number one defense versus the number one offense, or the one offense versus the two defense, one defense versus two offense. This is a drafted team, so you can't necessarily glean from it like, man, the defense as a whole looks good. You're looking more at individual players. Same thing with the offensive line. You're not be like, man, that offensive line's really gelling. It might not, because you've got a bunch of different kind of factions battling it out here. I just put out a piece of the 10 players I'm looking forward to seeing the most in the spring game. So we're going to do that segment one. Let's get right to it. Number 10. I got kind of a surprise here. It's not a player that's been mentioned a lot or at all, actually. And that's Kendrick Bell, the former quarterback, Ronnie Bell's younger brother. I have heard that he needs a little bit of maturity that he doesn't currently have, but you hope that he maybe finds it between now and the start of the season. Because as of right now, and we keep on talking about the Michigan wide receiver scholarship, I keep on forgetting that he exists. That's not a good thing. But nonetheless, Kendrick Bell is my number 10. They need him to step up. He is a taller wide receiver. And we've obviously seen what his brother can do. If he and his brother definitely thinks he's got the talent. He really pushed Michigan to recruit him. And granted, he came in as a quarterback and ended up being a wide receiver like his brother. Number 9 is a guy who has gotten a lot of hype. That's tight end Marlon Klein. I've heard some really good things about him, not only from press conferences, but in some of the conversations I've had outside of that. He is clearly going to be that number 2 tight end opposite Colston Loveland. We haven't really seen him. He's very talented. He's very fast. He also has a leg. He's the backup punter. At least he was last year. Saw him warming up with the punters. So German-born. He was a guy who finished out his high school career at Rabun Gap High School in Nacoochee, Georgia. What a name. So he would be my number 9. Number 8 is another guy who's gotten a lot of hype, and he's the most known commodity on this list, and that is Miles Hinton, the former 5-star, the transfer from Stanford. He started out the season last year. He started later in the season, had some injuries. He slimmed down so far this offseason and feels like he's moving a lot better. My question for him is how, he said like he didn't care about sports for the longest time. So how much does football mean to him? Right? Is that going to translate on the field? How much does he want it now? He's back for a 5th year. So it's going to be incumbent upon him to take it on himself and become that next great Michigan left tackle. Number 7 is maybe one of the most hyped guys in the entire class, and that not class, but team, is linebacker Jayshon Barham. Some of the conversations I've had with people are that he could be the a first-round draft pick next year, right? He's an absolute beast at linebacker. Maybe fell off a tiny bit last year at Maryland, but you think in this system, which is going to be a linebacker-centric system, this is a place where he could really thrive. He's got all of the intangibles. He's got everything you want. I'm excited to see him tomorrow and see what he's able to do. Number 6, I have Andrew Gentry. We haven't heard as much about Andrew Gentry in spring ball as we did, say, fall camp last year when Jim Harbaugh proclaimed that they have to find a role for him because he can't not be on the field. Well, turns out he could not be on the field except for on special teams plays. points after and field goals and such. But I'm expecting him to be the heir apparent at right tackle. He's rounding into football form after taking 2 years off for his Mormon mission. And I think that it will be interesting to see what he is able to do. We're going to get a good idea, depending on who the edge rushers are, how these tackles do, right? Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore are very good. TJ Guy, who didn't make this list, who was going to, but I just actually edged him out for Kendrick Bell because of the position of need. And I think that we'll get a good idea if we see some of them held at bay, because we know that Josiah and Derek Moore are very good. Yeah, anyway. Number 5 is Brandon Hillman. I could have gone to Zeke Berry here. He's gotten way more hype, but I am intrigued by where Brandon Hillman is entering year 2. I feel like I kind of have an idea who Zeke Berry is. Brandon Hillman, the former Notre Dame commit who flipped to Michigan after signing his NIL and everything to go to South Bend. So it was just over a year ago he came to Ann Arbor. I think that I'm curious, especially with his tweet of mocking the people who say Michigan needs to get an experienced defensive back in the transfer portal. I'm excited to see what he is able to do, especially with the opportunity presented with Rod Moore being out. Year 2 safeties, year 2 anything. You expect a guy to take a step forward. I think that he could be one of those guys that does exactly that. Number 4 is one of the most talked about guys, and with good reason, and more so from the position of need, and that is Frederick Moore, the 6'1" wide receiver, expected to be the deep ball threat. Certainly that could change if they're able to go and get a Kyle Ford. Also, if Kendrick Bell ends up kind of taking a step forward. But listen, they don't have a lot at that position. They need him to be able to take the top off. He looked really good when he was in last year. He got all kinds of spring hype last year as well. But it was more Samaj Morgan that ended up stealing the show. So I'm excited to see what Frederick Moore does tomorrow. Number 3, I could have gone with DJ Waller, but I feel like he's got the inside track to being the starting cornerback. So that makes me want to have my eyes that much more on Jair Hill, who's also gotten a lot of mention, was singled out by Lamar Morgan as a guy who was really coming on strong. Certainly was a guy that was a candidate to get some early playing time last year. Looked really good in the spring game when called upon. Had a very slight frame, though. I want to see how much bigger he might look. I want to see how much more just kind of fluid he might be, because that was his first taste of college football. So I feel like Jair Hill is a guy that I really want to see tomorrow. Next 2 are going to be more obvious. You can probably guess who they're going to be right now. Number 2 is Eno Etta, arguably the most hyped player of the entire spring ball session, a guy who has just been mentioned constantly. Anytime you ask who's really impressed you, Eno Etta is almost always that guy who is mentioned. He is 300 pounds. He is massive. They're moving him inside. They're moving him outside. He's doing a little bit of everything. Can be a depth piece, could be a focal point. Does he take that Kenneth Grant style step forward? I'm excited to see what he is capable of doing. And the spring game will be the first opportunity that we get to see that, kind of like Josiah Stewart last year when he came in as a transfer. Number 1 is the most obvious one that there could be, and that is Alex Orji, the quarterback. Certainly a little bit hamstrung by the fact that Jack Tuttle has not been mostly available in spring ball, thus not making it a full competition, but it sounds like he is at least outpacing the rest of the field. We know that he is athletic. We know that he has a big arm. Can he make the routine plays as well as the wow plays? Can he drive the team down the field? Can he score touchdowns? Can he take care of the football? What's his completion percentage going to be? How he does in this spring game is going to determine a lot about how we talk about this team for the next several months. So therefore, he is very clearly the number 1 guy. I am very interested to see how he performs now that we're looking at him less as a depth piece and more as a potential starting quarterback. Now, even if he doesn't have a good performance, that doesn't necessarily mean a ton, right? Because J.J. McCarthy started out really shaky last year before he kind of settled in. Jack Tuttle looked shakier than Orji, or even Davis Warren looked pretty good. And the depth chart didn't exactly work out quite the way we probably would have thought after spring ball. But at the same time, that's how it's going to work. Orji looks amazing. We're going to be sitting here talking about booking our tickets to Atlanta. If he doesn't look good, we're all going to be scouring the portal and trying to figure out where to go from here. So I am excited to see what he does. That's going to be Very, very, very interesting. All right, let's continue on. I've got plenty of things to get to here with the defensive depth chart. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, guys, I need you all to listen up for this huge announcement. I have been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on all of the scores, putting all of my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I'm finally on top. That's right, obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game, Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on the classic Monopoly, which is the most fun game of all time. You can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or you can go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. Go Ocean's 11 on them. My favorite part is the leaderboards where you can see who's a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. We'll continue on here as well in just a moment. Before we do, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the huge win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available for U.S. customers. All right, we have our defensive depth chart. Got to move from one screen to the next here. And hope it does it in a timely fashion. But not sure where I put it. That's the fun part, sweetheart. Oh, we'll find it here in a moment. Anyhow, it's I think the defense, we pretty much know who's set. That's why I don't want to take a whole show like we, really otherwise could have. But nonetheless, it's I want to find it here. It feels like I just did it, but I guess I did it like a week ago. There we go. So the Michigan depth chart, defensively, we know who a lot of the players are. It's going to be more about the depth. So I did a 2-deep here as far as that's concerned. And we'll start with defensive tackle. You know who the starters are. It's Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. So it's going to be who are the guys behind them. So I went with Rayshon Benny and Eno Etta. Etta obviously could also be an outside player, very well might be an outside player, but I feel like they're going to look at him, or they're looking at him and saying 300 pounds, getting better with his hands, doing all that kind of stuff. He's got a really explosive get off. I feel like he can be Kenneth Grant of this year. Rayshon Benny obviously has to heal from his injury. And I'm curious about Trey Pierce, who I asked Lou Esposito about, because I feel like he could absolutely be a piece. Again, I'm tantalized by the idea of adding CJ West, but he is visiting LSU today, so that doesn't necessarily preclude him from coming to Michigan. But I do think that I do really like that room. Obviously, I feel like it is the best on the entire team, really. And then you have edge rusher, which is, again, we know who the starters are going to be. That's kind of a routine thing that we're going to be saying a lot. So we're going to be talking more about the backups, my second guy. So Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart being the obvious guys to start for Michigan at edge rusher. TJ Guy has been one of the guys that has been mentioned frequently, and you know that he is certainly in that 2 deep. So then the next question is, who's the next guy? If it's not Etta, if I have him on the interior, I decided not to cop out, and I put Cameron Brandt as that next guy. Got a lot of hype last year as a true freshman, but it would be interesting to see, because I saw Brandon Collier, the PPI recruits. He's the guy who finds all these foreign-born players. Michigan's obviously gotten a few from Marlon Klein to Manuel Beagle. He's said, watch for Imeric Kumba this year. who's from France. So I am curious. I don't have him in this list, but I am curious to see how a guy like him, Keyshawn Bennett, a former 4-star who's just kind of we haven't seen, looks the type, but it makes me wonder, like, is it his time as well? He's gotten some mention as well. So it would not be surprising to see him maybe take that step forward as well. But, we're really looking at a lot of different players who could be taking that step forward. I realized that this isn't going to have as much to talk about. So we're going to have to find something because we're going to finish this out in segment 2. And then we'll find something else in segment 3. I guess we'll just talk spring game itself. But linebacker, your starters, obviously, because you got 2. Ernest Hausman and Jayshon Barham are your obvious starters. Who's behind them? Have not heard really anything about Jimmy Rolder, which is interesting, but I still have him listed. Jaden Hood not only has been mentioned several times as being a guy who's really impressed, but we actually met with the media. I was not there that day because of my back, but that's always a good sign. He started to kind of come along early last year before kind of falling off the map again. But I feel like, okay, this is it, man. Former 4-star from Florida, Powerhouse High School. It's your time. What are you going to do with it? Other candidates would include Samaj Bridgman, Micah Pollard, who have both gotten mentions as well as being players who have taken a big step forward. But Jimmy Rolder and Jaden Hood are the ones that I have as my next up. All right, so then we get to safety. My starters are Makari Page, Quentin Johnston. At the moment, Rod Moore is obviously one of those guys. I still have him listed as a starter. Just noted that he is injured. The backups then would be Zeke Berry and Brandon Hillman. It would be interesting to see. Rod Oden's a guy that I'll be curious to see how he does tomorrow. But it is pretty obvious who your backups are. You're 4 deep there. You feel good about Zeke Berry. I feel like Brandon Hillman, just a big dude. Got a lot of positive attention, both at the end of the season and near the once we got into the off season. So I am excited to see what he is capable of doing. We've already talked about him quite at length. Cornerback, again, to me, feels very obvious who the starters are. Will Johnson is the obvious starter. And then DJ Waller is the one that is most likely to be opposite him. Again, we need to see it. Because this time last year, everyone's talking Amarian Walker. And then he plays in the spring game and gets torched by a walk-on and looks terrible. And then it just didn't work out. They go to the portal. So it's going to be up to DJ Waller to fulfill his promise. Had some injury issues late last year. But then he's going to have Jair Hill and Jaden McBurrows champing at the bit to try to get at him. Heard a lot about both. So McBurrows is going to be obviously moonlighting kind of there to some degree. But Jair and Jaden would be the ones that I would say are going to be the most likely to be those outside backups. I really want to see. I've heard good things about Cody Jones. Still, Miles Pollard, I'm still kind of waiting. I haven't heard much about him. So I'm hoping that he takes that step forward. He's got all the promise in the world, and he's been a guy I've just been hyping up since he arrived, and I hope that he ends up getting there. So that leaves us with one more position on defense, and that's nickelback, because obviously Mikey Sainristil still took that position and ran with it like no one's business. The guy there, to me, again, obvious, is Jaden McBurrows. The backup then would be Zeke Berry, who is patterning his game after Mikey Sainristil still, and is supposedly taking on that same type of leadership role. But those are the guys that I think that are the shoo-ins. Jaden McBurrows, you have to remember, like when Will Johnson was out, Mikey Sainristil still moved on the outside. McBurrows came in and played that inside slot corner position. So expect more of the same. So pretty much like who's the starting defense? We know it. It's who's the guys are going to come in behind them, barring injuries or just a rapid ascendancy or the transfer portal. But for the most part, we're pretty much set, because you look at a lot of these guys, they were on the field for the final play of the Alabama game, a lot of these guys. And so you would look at it and say, well, chances are that's going to hold pat. So that's that. So what am I looking forward to more generally in the spring game? Because like I said, the format is much different, right? You're not going to necessarily be able to just sit there and say the defense is great or the offense is great. You're going to be looking at individual players. We talked about the players. What am I looking forward more overall We'll get to that here in our spring ball preview in just a moment. Now, you don't need tickets to go to the spring game, but imagine if you did. Then there's only one place that you would go for it, and you're going to want to keep this handy come the season when that comes around, and that's Game Time. And you're going to even want to use it this summer because Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. One of the best parts, I think, is the price. Remember, if you have been watching or listening to this show since January, we went on to Game Time's app live and looked up Lions home playoff tickets. And at that time, everyone was talking about how expensive they were. Now, these were still expensive, but they were half the price of what everyone was reporting that the get-in-the-door price was. That's how good Game Time is, and they're verified. They've got all kinds of great things, and great part is you get to see exactly where you're sitting with the views from your seat. So with the seat views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You know exactly what you're going to be looking at when you arrive. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Beautiful out today, but it's colder and windy. Kind of a precursor for tomorrow, except for it's going to be overcast. Sunny, though, today. So that's exciting. I don't know why I'm talking about the weather. Because I'm gearing up for being outside. Granted, I'm going to have a coat on and sweat. I'm going to feel good. I'm going to look good. I don't know what I'm talking about here. That's how sometimes these transitions, I sit there and think, I'm going to talk about this. And then this is the silliest one yet. Because I was almost about to explain to you what I was going to wear to the game tomorrow. And there's no need for that. No one cares. Only I care. Sarah might care, but she doesn't even care. Anyway, what am I looking forward to other than hopefully staying warm at the spring game? Like I said, the format is different. So, again, we're looking at individual players, but that doesn't mean we can't get some themes out of it. And it's difficult because you're looking at the one team altogether. You don't want to see any glaring weaknesses, but you also want to see some ability made. So in a way, you almost want to see like the good players taking advantage of the emerging players, is I'll call it. But you also want to see the emerging players look good. You just don't want to see like, and again, it doesn't matter too much because I don't think Michigan looked that good in the spring game last year. I thought they didn't look like a national championship winning team at that time, right? Amarian Walker getting torched by Peyton O'Leary. That was not a great sign, but obviously, you want to see some individual performances that stand out. Benjamin Hall was a star last year. I'd like to see that continue. You'd like to see a guy like him or maybe Cole Cabana, a guy we haven't really seen, take that step. I think that the most important thing is less seeing like what's Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant doing. It's more of these guys that either the ones I mentioned or ones that we've seen kind of have some glimpses, right? I mean, if it's Peyton O'Leary again, then you're kind of like, well, maybe he's ready to actually be like a D1 college, on the field all the time type of wide receiver, right? They've talked about him like that. So you hope that maybe that he has crossed the Rubicon and is able to finally be that. Benjamin Hall, can he take that step forward? I thought, Kalel Mullings didn't have a ton of yards, but he had some really good hard runs last year. For all the talk of Benjamin Hall at coming out of the spring game in 2023, I was kind of like, I'm really impressed with Kalel Mullings. I wanted to see more of him. He was the one that I was really excited about. And it's funny because at that time, still, there were people that were like, I don't want to see him ever touch a football again. And yet he really took a step forward during the season. People are now kind of clamoring to see him. So I want to see less of like, how does Donovan Edwards do? How does, Mason Graham do? I don't really care. They can sit for all I care, to be honest. I want to see who are the guys that maybe we're not talking about. Guys that were either in that list of 10 or guys who weren't that suddenly look really good. Now, a one-off can be a one-off, right? They know what they're going up against. They go up against it all the time. And even then, I frequently think back to a guy like Brandon Herron, who had one monster game for Michigan against Western Michigan in 2011. And it was all over SportsCenter for having 2 pick sixes. And everyone's like, oh, Michigan might have something here. And then we never heard from him again. So you have to take everything with a grain of salt. But I do want to see what happens when the lights finally come on, because that's one of the big parts of the spring game. It's not just like they see things in practice, right? For the coaches, it's in part like, how do you perform in front of a crowd and on TV? Because some of these guys haven't had that opportunity before, right? They've played in front of their very diminutive high school crowds, never nationally televised. How do you look when the lights come on? This is like a dress rehearsal for the season, even though it's so far away. Obviously, the early enrollees are always interesting. We mentioned Benjamin Hall. He was an early enrollee last year. How does Brady Prescorn look? How does Jaden Davis, who I haven't really talked much about, how does Jaden Davis look? I kind of, blank on a lot of the other guys that were there, because, there's a couple of linemen. I don't care as much about how Blake Frazier or Jake Guarnera look, just because we don't need you guys yet. If you guys are playing meaningful minutes this year, that's probably means something has gone horribly awry. But as far as the kind of more skill guys, like a Prescorn or a I'm blanking on the other guy I was going to mention, but those who have arrived early, I for the most part, if you're not a lineman, I want to see what you look like. I think that's the other thing. And the guys who we've seen bits and pieces of, like Zeke Berry, to just make us feel good about where we think you can go. Brandon Hillman, we haven't seen him, but make us feel good about where you can go. Jaden McBurrows, DJ Waller, make us proud. That's really it. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We will be back with an episode tomorrow night, probably relatively late, after I get back to Fenton and get all the writing done and everything like that. Probably charge some batteries, and we'll talk about what we saw. So we will get to that tomorrow evening, and we'll discuss it. Hopefully the field turf allergy is mitigated by the allergy medication that I was so graciously provided by one of you. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.